Nigel Harris, who's the editor of Rail Magazine, could literally, in about 5 minutes, take everything you said and say, actually, James, you're wrong on almost every single count.
Well, pick the biggest.
The question is, where do I start?
Pick the biggest.
Fare rises. Okay, fare rises. That's policy implemented by government.
Half.
Set out in the
Half is regulated, half's unregulated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But the big proportion of that is government, and that has been rising.
Half is regulated. RPI inflation plus 1% each year.
No, hang on. Set out in the terms of each franchise when they're taken to tender, you get the government fare rises, you get a government structure policy.
50%, mate. I'm happy to be corrected, but obviously I do a little bit of research. So half of fares are regulated. The rest are set at commercial rates.
Mm-hmm. The point I'm trying to make, James, is that it is not as simple as saying that the train operating companies are the ones that are making the fare increases go up.
No one said that. So they're keeping the profits, Simon.
Well, they're not. Actually, a couple of the train operating companies are looking to give the franchises back because they're not making any profit.
Because they overbid.
In Scotland has done a very bad job, even though actually...
And what punishments and penalties are in place? Because if you and I pledged to buy something and then we said, actually, well, I'm going to keep it for a couple of years and then I'm going to stop making my payments because I can't afford it anymore, what would happen to us?
So, in response to that, James, let me ask you a question.
Oh.
When GNER had the East Coast Main Line...
I'm not a train spotter. I'm not going to know the answer to this question. But that's the problem,
isn't it?
Well, no, the problem is that I asked you a question.
Someone gives you the answer and you don't want to listen, James.
You just said you were asking me a question, not giving me an answer.
My question was, what changed when GNR became National Express on the East Coast? What happened when National Express became government-owned, which was East Coast? What happened when East Coast became Virgin? Actually, the thing that changed was the branding on the side of the trains and not much more, because it was still all the same trains being used. It was still the infrastructure managed by Network Rail. It was still all the same drivers. It's literally a name change, James. And where the money actually
But that's not true. I wish you hadn't started off by telling me I was wrong about everything, because it makes me bridle. And then you made a massive mistake in the first thing you said about government setting all rail fares. So let's just go back on that. What's happened to the East Coast now?
So the East Coast now is currently, as you know, run by Virgin. And they have had the biggest amount of investment in rolling stock, which is a huge thing, that they have had for nearly 20 years. Since the introduction of their last set of intercity trains, which were the Class 91.
So why am I paying more to travel between London and Peterborough as a commuter than I would to travel across the whole of Germany whenever I wanted?
It's demand, James. Demand in railways has gone up substantially since the early 1990s. In fact, you were right about one thing, absolutely. British Rail.
One more than you so far.
Well, British Rail didn't get a lot of money in the last 10 years of its existence.
Didn't get any, did it?
Not a lot. They were always working to a budget that was being cut.
So listen, let's not fall out. I don't understand why this has gone off on a slightly odd tangent. What do you think the future should look like?
So for me, there are two models that our railways could follow. You either, as has been thought about, nationalise it, or you can follow the Japanese railway model. And let me tell you, they're the best railways in the world. So you've got two brilliant railways. Japanese railways, they're fully privatised, but all the profits are carefully regulated, and they have to put a certain amount back into their rolling stock programmes, but their government heavily subsidises them for infrastructure projects.
And the money goes to infrastructure, it doesn't go to people like Brian Souter and Richard Branson?
I couldn't tell you whether it went to Japanese equivalents, but yeah, the railway companies do make profit.
So when Chris Grayling moved last month to bail out Stagecoach and Virgin, which was supposed to be running the East Coast line until 2023, who would you describe as losing out under that process?
I think we all lose out, James, and the reason
well, who doesn't lose out?
No, everyone loses out.
What do Richard Branson and Brian Souter lose?
It's really simplistic to bring it back to the top of that particular chain, James.
Okay.
That's the thing. You say
I'll just ask you again, what do they lose? After saying that they could run it for commuters in return for making a certain payment, and then when they, a few years down the line, can't make that payment. Again, I don't understand what you're cross about. I've asked you a simple question. It seems to me that they're going to be fine, aren't they?
I'm trying to answer your question. You're saying to me, And it's fair because that's the problem. That's the biggest problem railway enthusiasts have. It's perception. And it's perception of the problems. And it doesn't help when people who actually don't know enough about the subject start talking
Well,
about
it doesn't help when you ring up and say that government sets fares. And even I know that that's not true.
that You've said it's all down to the private companies. I'm saying it's not as simple as that. There is, as you say, a 50-50 split in that. But you have to remember, over the last, 80 years, we're looking at nationalisation was originally 1948, right? It's now 2018, okay? We are now seeing possibly the biggest programme of rolling stock investment in this country.
Then why are fares going up, and in comparison to mainland Europe, exponentially? Go on.
It's unfortunately a demand and supply problem.
Right.
We are not building, we are not overhauling track, we're not able to do new things with railways because we don't get the investment, and the rate of demand has gone up.
But the companies running our railways are making enormous profits.
They're not making that big profits, actually.
Well,
in the great scheme of things.
In the great scheme of things, they're not making profits.
Profit's not the problem here. This is the thing. I would be happy. I'm going to throw this out.
What is the problem, Simon?
I would be happy to see a nationalised railway if it was done correctly. Nothing that anyone has said about nationalising it actually convinces me it would be done properly. And our biggest problem is investment. We do not invest anywhere.
Well, then I think we're probably back to where we started, which is you telling me that the money going into the pockets of the shareholders is in the great scheme of things negligible, and then you telling me that what we need is a lot more investment. So where do you think the money that should be invested in the railways is currently going?
So just to answer that point then,
if you don't
Japan,
mind.
They do make a profit.
I'm not talking about Japan, I'm talking about Britain. The money that should be going into the railways, where is it currently going?
Well, quite a lot of it is actually going back into mostly the cross-country projects and HS2.
No, it's not. If I'm paying a fare on South West trains and you think more of that fare should be going into investment, where is that money currently going?
At the end of the chain, absolutely, there is a profit being made by a company which might have the name on the side of the train.
And how likely is that company to be part-owned by a foreign government?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Happy New Year.